Hey Muffins, welcome back to channel. I've got a subscriber request here for the E100, just kind of trying to get caught up on a lot of these. I do have a tips and tricks playlist I've compiled and I'm putting together. Shoot over there if there's maybe a tank or aspect to the game you're struggling with. But let's dive into the E100. I love this thing. This is a great German heavy tank. So going right in, the E100 has a really good armor profile. However, a very flat, large turret, very square shaped, great if you're angling it against enemies. So I'll go a little bit more into that, but right off the beginning, I'm kind of paying attention and looking at where my mediums, my lights, my entire team, I notice that we're splitting up. Some are going into town, some are going up over to the right. So I'm kind of moving a little bit more up into the middle to get myself aggressively in those frontline positions. As a heavy tank, that's where you want to be. And the E100 is excellent for that. So I'm trying to get myself up on the front lines, fulfilling that role as being a heavy tank. And one of the key ways of knowing how to play with a heavy tank is understanding its armor profile. So here in this little bit of slope, I'm trying to use the gun depression. My turret, even though very flat, is a bit more sloped just because I am on that hill, helping me to bounce any rounds like from that grill, even though I could have gotten penetrated from him. But really trying to use the landscape still to protect myself. The E100 is great for side scraping. Anytime an enemy is focusing on me during reload, I do angle my turret quite a bit and I do wiggle the tank, and you'll notice just a lot of the shots that you're able to bounce. Now here, trying to make some judgment calls because I've got a T-62 over on one side. I've got some other tanks I'm wanting to push up against and try to get some other shots off. So it's also very key, even though a heavy tank, and I do talk about this in my tips and tricks with light, medium tanks, so forth. It's really the same rule applies, is not to tunnel vision. Trying to understand where my team is, where my enemy is, making decisions based on those, moving from cover to cover, and then even from here. So like I was mentioning earlier, I know I'm kind of bouncing a little bit off track, but just from like wiggling, trying to angle that turret against when the enemies have open shots at you, even though I didn't necessarily have the landscape or cover quite a bit. So I was able to angle my turret, wiggle, and I was able to actually bounce quite a bit of rounds there. And E100 is very, very capable for that. Now, I do run into some, just kind of some bad shots here, but I'm really trying to pay attention, just see where that grill is doing before I pop out, try to get the shot off over on the mouse, hoping that he's distracted. So even using your third-person view as a heavy tank before popping out, kind of getting an idea of the landscape of where the enemies are, your team is, can really help you as well. So in terms of positioning, one thing that helps me is I position myself a lot of the times according to how my team is positioned. Even if it's a bad team, I'm trying to position myself in a way that they can support me from the positions I'm moving to and from. I mean, even if they're a bad teammate, the fact that sometimes they're there will intimidate an enemy from popping out or coming out, or a light tank trying to circle you or whatnot. And here we're really getting ourselves in a bad spot here, quite an uneven lineup. And especially this Vickers, which in my opinion is currently just OP in the game. But trying to just utilize that armor profile, but just going back to, I position myself according to where my teammates sometimes are, but also in a way of fulfilling my role, if that makes sense. So here, trying to use some of these dead tanks, trying to stay close to the edges because I don't want this Vickers to circle of death me. His strength is maneuverability, and so if I left myself too exposed and out in the open and not around anything like this big rock next to me or these dead tanks, it could really put me in a very, very bad spot. So keeping yourselves close to objects, other large mountain hills, teammates, things of that sort, can really help you against getting circled to death. So this just honestly was just such an unfortunate game, but really, what do? You know, there's only so much you can do, and even at the end of the game, all you can say is, hey, you know what? I did my best, I tried, and it was fun. So the E100 is one of those tanks that, like I had mentioned, even though it has a very flat turret, it's very, very important that if enemies do have shots at you and you don't have that ability to get behind cover, to angle that turret. That'll be huge. So here, looking at the lineup, our team wanted to go left. I'm looking at our team. We've got a lot of tanks that don't have a lot of armor. So going over here on this side of the map was actually a pretty wise decision. If we would have all put ourselves in positions to rely on our armor, which is the majority of our team's weakness, it could have been pretty bad. So I thought that was a pretty good call. Now here I'm trying to figure out how to aggressively get in and cut off that T92, but then I see this leopard here, so then I just decided just to go for it, and like once again really trying to put myself up on those front lines. And this leopard is he is putting himself in a place to rely on his armor quite a bit. Unfortunately, my team puts themselves in a place to rely on their armor quite a bit, which isn't really all that great. But the E100 can honestly really be a great tank. Like, if you've noticed, like I was just trying to wiggle my tank a bit, and I was able to have that leopard miss his shot. My tracks were able to absorb that shot. So I'm always constantly thinking of in terms or in ways of how to support my team. So I'm looking at the lineup. This replay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the team lineup because that really helps you in position. So I see some of my team over here. They're kind of moved. The enemy's pushing over here on the right side. There's some teammates that are kind of up and around them, able to get that shot off, just kind of peek through there as I wasn't quite detected yet. And I'm trying to move up, but I can see I've got a grill and an FV405 on the front lines. And if they get rushed, that could put them in a pretty bad spot to rely on their armor, which they don't really have much. So I'm trying to turn myself around to get even in front of them, or in a way to position myself so I can side scrape. So as I'm kind of getting myself in this position, one of the key things, like I had said at the beginning of the video, is understanding your tank's armor profile, understanding those weak links, those strengths and those weaknesses. Heavy tanks, if you guys are familiar with the Armor Inspector app, I would highly recommend downloading that app because you can really see the comparisons between how your tank is compared to other tanks that are taking shots at it, because other tanks have different penetration values, and you can just see by angling at certain degrees or amounts on what can cause blocks, or at what point when angling a certain way could maximize the strength of your armor. So here I'm trying to use my third-person view as much as I can to look over these buildings to see if I can maybe get any sort of shot, looking for those distracted targets. I unfortunately just took a shot from that FV, but I'm being very aware of the map, trying to get myself in cover. Here I'm trying to turn around as much as I can to try and side scrape and help him not get a shot off on me. Angling that turret once again, and you can see just by angling correctly, it actually strengthens my turret. Whereas if I kept my turret facing toward him, my turret is very flat, and his chance of penetrating me would have actually been a lot greater. So even though these two replays were both losses, I just wanted to play two back-to-back games just to give you guys some real E100 feedback and some tips. I honestly love this thing. I think it's a great tank. But hopefully this helps. This is the Muffin here. You guys stay cool and keep tanking.